Before we get started, this video contains discussion of violence, sexual violence, and ideas that may be controversial. I believe that these are important topics and ideas to discuss, but they may not be appropriate for all viewers. Also, I do use my personal experiences and beliefs to discuss these topics. It's nothing graphic, but if you are a family member, colleague, or friend and don't want to know that about me, that's totally fine. Please turn off this video now. One last note, when I use the gender identifying terms male, female, or man, woman, I'm referring to all people who identify with such labels. Hello, I'm Riley Brennan and I'm a master's student at the University of Denver. I've been making some videos to discuss my research and projects during my time in grad school because conferences I'd applied to or planned to apply to have been postponed or canceled. Today's discussion, I'm thrilled to announce, was originally formatted as a workshop that was accepted for presentation at the Sexual Health Initiatives for Teens North Carolina Conference supposed to take place this weekend. The title was Deconstructing Power in the Language of Sexual Assault, a collaborative workshop by a young adult. Obviously, this can't be an interactive and collaborative workshop, but I would still like to share some of the ideas I wanted to present. My application abstract was the following. How we talk to clients about sex, consent, and sexual assault affects how they feel and what they learn from us. As a young adult myself, I've recently experienced education and counseling on sexual health topics and found that the language can be a major catalyst or barrier to understanding and growth. Specifically, terms like survivor and gender-based violence are controversial yet seen as best practices within the field. These terms ignore inherent power dynamics and render the LGBTQIA+ community invisible. Digging in, my university has a department focused on Gender Violence Prevention and Education, or GVPE, sometimes called Gender-Based Violence, or GV. My understanding is that this label avoids direct labeling of behaviors that might be upsetting to potential clients or are exclusive of other behaviors. That's fine to me. However, I got to wondering about what is included in gender violence. This term indicates that the violence occurs because of someone's gender, as if someone is hurt because they are a specific gender. In recognition of patriarchal dominance and toxic masculinity scripts, men might act out GV against women. Similarly, violence against transgender, non-binary, or gender non-conforming people could be considered GV in the current hegemonic systems. In a more broad understanding of GV, ignoring systems of power, violence by women against men could be considered GV depending on the context and motivation for violence. Still, this definition excludes same-gender or agendered violence. Such exclusivity reinforces heteronormativity and highlights male-female violence. I think a more fitting description would be relationship-based violence, or RBV. This term puts the motivation of the violence on the relationship any two people have, regardless of gender identity. For example, most violence I have encountered is not because I am a woman, point blank. It could be better described as related to the relationships I have with other people, regardless of gender, which are often influenced by our individual relationships to relevant power structures through gender. In a fight with a girlfriend, you wouldn't say I hit her because she's a woman, but you could say I hit her because of the relationship I have with her as my girlfriend. To be clear, I'm generally a pacifist, but hypotheticals. The same could be said for violence between family members, friendships, etc. I believe RBV is a more appropriate term to explore violence in relationships or remaining able to connect relationships to power structures. This next term can be very controversial, a hot take, I dare say, so I want to be really clear about my argument. I believe survivor should not be the default term for someone who has experienced sexual violence. If individuals prefer this term, by all means we should use their preferred language. I am not saying survivor is a bad word or wrong term in all cases. I'm saying there has been a trend of exclusively using survivor, demanding that people who have experienced sexual violence use this term, and that is wrong. But if people like survivor, they are survivors, and that's great. When I was starting my substantial research paper, I met with people working in the sexual assault prevention field. I used the term victim and then people would correct me with the word survivor. I would say, no, I'm a victim. And they would say, no, we say survivor here. And I'd be like, that's cool, but I'm a victim. And they'd say, no, you're a survivor. Sorry, but don't I get to decide what I'm called and how I refer to myself? My problem with survivor for people who have experienced sexual violence is complex, but it mostly comes down to recognition of power. Survivor puts the power on me as the actor. I survived. This is exactly what some people find empowering, and that's great for them. To me, though, something happened to me. Someone raped me. I was raped. I did not do anything. There was, in my cases, a man who did something to me, and he could not be removed from the equation. Don't forget about him and his actions to focus on my strength. I didn't do shit to be raped. But, you may say, you have survived since. There are several issues with this. 1, I didn't ask to survive. He didn't kill me. Again, that was on him. 2, since then, I've honestly tried and accidentally failed to not survive, and then I gave up on that. 3, define survive. A part of me has not survived. A part of me has died each time I've experienced sexual violence. Saying I survived makes it sound like I'm okay, which is easier for an outsider to hear and accept. But in reality, I don't think all of me did. Part of me will never be the same. 4, this is not to say that I don't recognize that many people are murdered or commit suicide after experiencing sexual violence. I completely recognize that I am alive and not dead. However, an emphasis on survivors exclude those who did not survive from the conversation. As my dad once said, and what about the non-survivors? Why don't we care about them? Ultimately, it is my personal feeling that the term survivor removes the actor who committed violence against me and ignores the parts of me that are not okay. It wasn't a positive experience. I don't need to call it or myself something positive. It was a very negative thing that happened to me and other people, and it's okay to be negative about it. I think it might be easier for other people to use the term survivor because then they don't have to think about the perpetrator. They don't have to think about the crime, just the strength that has been shown afterwards. And I get that. It is hard to think about what happens in sexual violence, but ignoring it is a disservice to the people who experienced it. It is a crime that happens to people at the actions and power of other people. Our language should recognize that truth and that power. So, that was a lot. And again, I cannot stress this enough. If you have experienced sexual violence and prefer the term survivor, I will call you a survivor. Everyone should call you a survivor. You are a survivor. If you write about people who have experienced sexual violence and feel uncomfortable using a term other than survivor, challenge why that is. Ask who benefits. And then maybe you'll keep using it. Maybe you'll hyphenate victim survivor. Maybe you'll use victim, or maybe you'll come up with something else entirely. All I ask is that we start investigating our following of the status quo of best practices, that we allow people to choose their own labels and accept them for those people. Thank you so much for listening. I would love to hear your thoughts, comments, questions, and critiques. I've really put myself out there with this video, so thank you for your compassion and kindness.